Sounds True and Windhorse Productions bring you Secrets of the World. It is said that the old and the very, very young and the ones we call whisperers hear most clearly of all. If you wish to hear as well as they do and discover the secrets waiting for you, you must learn to open your ears from the inside out, travel all over without moving about, and make friends with silence.
My father's mother was my Grandma Ida. She lived in the Bronx, but Grandma Ida came to visit us every Friday for dinner, and she often stayed the night. I loved my Grandma Ida, but I was also afraid of her. Now, here are the things I loved about my Grandma Ida. She was not much taller than me, and she had white hair like sea foam. Her skin was like porcelain, with teeny tiny little black and red marks like miniature buttons on her cheeks. Her blue eyes were like the insides of seashells. And my Grandma Ida could cook. She always brought food with her on Friday nights, latkes, gefilte fish, home-cooked, blintzes, cookies, and boiled chicken like silk. We would always feast on my Grandma Ida's food. Then my parents would go out. My grandma would play cards downstairs. My brother and I could go upstairs and watch TV for hours. But my Grandma Ida often had to sleep in my bedroom. And what frightened me? My little grandma snored as loud as a man. I used to rush upstairs, get into bed before my Grandma Ida, turn my back to the wall, pull the covers over my head, and wish myself into sleep, because if I woke up and I was thinking any single word clearly, my grandma would snore. Mostly, she snored my name in her Yiddish accent. Lorella. Grandma Ida wore diamond earrings. She wore them during the day. She wore them to sleep at night. They glittered and shimmered in her ears, and I wanted them. My mother knew this. She could tell. At the dinner table, I would close my eyes and imagine that my grandma was taking off the diamond earrings and putting them on my ears. My mother would kick me under the table. Don't wish for anything that's not yours. I would open my eyes and stare at my grandmother's ears. Shh, said my mother. I can hear you thinking. One night, the worst possible thing happened. My Grandma Ida came up to sleep at the same time that I did. I rushed out of my clothes into my pajamas, threw myself under the covers, turned my back to her, wished myself into sleep as she climbed into bed and turned off the lights. Then she said to me, Lorella, you're sleeping? Oh, you can't lie to a grandmother. No. You want to talk? Okay, so talk. So I turned around, and there in the dark were her earrings, shining in her ears. My mother was not home, so I asked the question I always wanted to know. Grammy, where did you get those diamond earrings? And my grandma turned on the light and said, Ei, meine kleine schöne Mädelach, my beautiful little girl, I got them in Lomja. Lomja! She got them in Lomja. Lomja was a mythical place to me. It was a village in the old country in Poland where my grandmother was born. She talked about Lomja. Lomja, it was a place of mud. There was so much rain. The houses, they were on stilts. The chicken, the goats, the geese, they slept underneath the house. But sometimes so much rain, the animals, they slept in the bed with us. What could be more wonderful? And in April, when the sun began to shine, the roses, they were big, bigger than matzo balls. Grandma, you got those earrings in Lomja? Now my Grandma Ida smiled, and she said, Come, let's go out. Out? It was night. She put on her slippers and her robe. I got up, put my slippers on and my bathrobe. I followed behind my grandma. We tiptoed right through the kitchen. My grandmother took 2 big beach towels and we went out into the garden. She put the towels down on the grass. Lie down. I lay down. She lay down beside me. Now I will tell you the story. When I was your age, my Baba, my grandma, took me out in the garden in Lomja behind our house. It was night. The stars, they were shining. She reached up with the hand all the way to the sky. She took down 2 stars. In her hand, she had 2 little diamond earrings. So, the stars, they had become diamonds. She put one in my right ear, one in my left ear, and she said to me, Mädelach, I give to you the gift of dreams. And then my grandma, I saw it. With her right hand reached up, I saw her hand rise all the way up into the sky, and she took down 2 stars. When her hand came back down and she opened her palm, there were 2 little diamond earrings. I knew it was real because her earrings were still glittering in her ears. One for your right ear, one for your left ear, kleiner Mädelach. I give to you the gift of dreams. Now, I don't remember. How did I get back upstairs? Did I walk back up? Did my little grandma carry me? I don't remember it at all. But when I woke up in the morning, she was already out of bed, and downstairs I was alone, and there were diamond earrings in my ears, and I panicked. How could I explain this to my mother? She'd never believe that I didn't talk my grandma into it. But when I went downstairs, no one said a word. And you know, I really believe that after that day, I remembered my dreams. And they were vivid and colorful. So I knew that my Grandma Ida had given me the gift of dreams. And you know, later, when I was grown up and my Grandma Ida had died, I told my mother this story, and she smiled. I said, "Do you think it's a little made-up story like a Baba Misa?" And my mother took out a box in her dresser, a little box, and in it were my Grandma Ida's earrings. She'd given them to her before she died. I said, "Did she ever tell you where she got them?" My mother said, "In Lomja, from the stars." The Black Sea is actually between Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Persia, that whole area, and Eastern Europe and Russia. It was a great trade route from the 5th to 9th century, and it was an impenetrable sea because of the great warriors that lived to the north. In fact, all the stories about the Amazons, the one-breasted women warriors, come from the northern Caucasus, where even Alexander the Great could never get by. There are 7 mountain ranges around the Black Sea, and my grandmother said that the Black Sea was so big that it looked like an ocean. One day, a poor fisherman took his son down to the sea. The fisherman threw his net onto the water and prayed, "May my son have a life of wealth and happiness." Instantly, the fisherman caught 100 fish. "You see, my prayer has worked." But when the fisherman looked, among the fish was one large, beautiful, gleaming, shining, splendid red fish. The fisherman said to his son, "My son, keep your eyes on that fish. That red fish is your future, is your fortune. I'm going to get a cart to take that fish to the market. Don't take your eyes off that fish." The father left, and the boy obediently looked at the fish. But the red fish was gasping for water, struggling and squiggling. And the boy felt so sorry for the fish. "It's so beautiful. What a pity." And without a thought, the fisherman's son just lifted up the fish and threw it back into the sea. And the red fish swam away, and then swam back, stood straight up on its tail, and spoke. "Thank you for saving my life. You are so kind. Whenever you want anything, just for me." And the red fish took a tiny little bone from its fin and gave it to the fisherman's son. The fisherman's son put the bone in his pocket, and the red fish swam away. Just then his father returned, and when the fisherman saw that his son had thrown the red fish back into the sea, he was furious. "You are so stupid. No fisherman takes pity on a fish. You are not my son. I never want to see you again." And the fisherman took the 99 little fish, put them in the cart, and left the boy alone. The fisherman's son began to walk. But all of a sudden, he heard a sound, and out from the woods came a beautiful, elegant, long-horned stag that was breathing heavily, its eyes glazed over with fear, being chased by hunters. The fisherman's son, his heart ached for the stag. Without a thought, he stood before the beast and caught it by the horns. The hunters rode around the fisherman's son and the stag and said, "Let go of that animal. We're hunting that animal. It's ours." Can't you see that it's a tame stag? You can't hunt a tame stag." Confused, the hunters left. Then the fisherman's son let go of the stag's horns, and the animal pawed the ground looked to the fisherman's son, and spoke.
"Thank you for saving my life. You are so kind. Whenever you need anything, call for me."
And the stag gave the fisherman's son a hair from its tail. He put the hair in his pocket next to the bone and watched as the stag galloped elegantly back among the trees. "What an unusual day it is today," said the fisherman's son. And then all of a sudden he looked up because he heard the sound of a crane. "Coo, coo," and the crane was being hunted by an eagle. Oh, he felt such pity for the beautiful white bird that without a thought he lifted up a stone, threw it at the eagle, grazing its wings without harming it, and the eagle flew away. And the crane alighted on the ground right next to the fisherman's son. "Thank you for saving my life. You are so kind. Whenever you need anything, call for me." And the crane gave him a white feather. He put the feather in his pocket next to the hair and the bone and watched the crane fly away. He walked a little further when suddenly from the brush came a red fox, its tail down, running quickly, being chased by dogs. Oh, he was so sorry for the fox that he lifted up his coat and let the fox hide between his legs. The dogs circled the fisherman's son and then turned and left. And he lifted his coat and the fox crawled out, looked at him and spoke.
"Thank you for saving my life. You are so kind. Whenever you need anything, call for me."
And the red fox gave him a red hair from his back. He put the red hair next to the white feather, next to the stag's hair, next to the bone, and watched the fox scurry away. And then he continued walking. All of a sudden, he came to the strangest sight. There was a mountain. On top of the mountain there was a palace, but leading up to the palace was a long, winding line of young, handsome, wealthy men. "I wonder what they're doing," he said, so curious. He got to the top of the hill and went to the first young man, who was holding his neck and trembling. "Whatever is going on here?" said the fisherman's son. "Well, you see, in this palace there is a beautiful, wealthy, all-seeing princess, and she will marry and share her wealth with whoever one of us can hide from her. But I have just learned, getting to the front of the line, that if she can find you, she cuts off your head." Oh, the fisherman's son thought, "These wealthy young men, they have everything to lose, but me, I have nothing to lose." "I'll go in your place," said the fisherman's son. "Well, okay," said the wealthy young man. And the fisherman's son went right into the palace. And there, on a gold throne, sat the beautiful, all-seeing princess. In her right hand she held a mirror. In her left hand she held a sword. The fisherman's son had never set eyes on anyone so beautiful. When she saw the fisherman's son, she burst out laughing. You? You are going to hide from me?" And in that second, he remembered the 4 magic animals. "I'll need 4 chances," said the fisherman's son. The all-seeing princess found that extremely interesting. "All right," she said, "but not 1 second more than 4 chances. I'm in no rush to cut off your head." And out he went, and he went right to the sea and called for the red fish by holding the little bone in his hand. Blub came the fish, stood up on its tail and said, "Hello, you." Well, fisherman's son told his story and said that he had to hide where no one could find him. The red fish gladly took him on his back deep, deep down into the ocean, then pushed him down into a cave that was beneath the sea, and the red fish floated in front to hide him. The all-seeing princess looked in every direction. She couldn't find him. Then she lifted up her mirror in which she could see everything. She looked in the sky, to the east, to the west, and then she looked in the sea, and there was the red fish. She peeked behind the red fish, and there was the fisherman's son. The princess thought, "He is remarkable." He came right back, and he said, "Well?" And she took a look at him and said, "You better find a better place to hide." He thought to himself, "That princess is a wizard." Off he went. He went right to the woods and called for the stag with the stag's hair. And the stag arrived. "Help! May I help you?" He told the stag his story, and then said that the stag should hide him where no one, not even a demon, could find him. "Climb on my back." The stag took him over 7 mountain ranges, right to where the other world begins, pushed him through, and then stood right in front of the threshold to hide him. The all-seeing princess looked in all directions. She couldn't find him. She lifted up her mirror, and there she saw the stag, and she saw him hiding in the other world. "Oh, he is extraordinary! How interesting!" thought the princess. Back to the palace he came. "You best find some place to hide better than the other world," she said. He thought to himself, "Isn't she splendid?" "All right," said the fisherman's son. He had 2 more chances. Off he went, and he called for the crane. "Oh, may I help you? You have to hide me where demons and demonesses can't find me." On the crane's back he went, and the crane took him straight up all the way to where the sky meets heaven, pushed him right through to heaven, and hovered beneath to hide him. The princess looked in all directions. She couldn't find him. Then she looked in her mirror. She saw the crane, and saw him right at the gates of heaven. "He is an unusual young man," she thought. But when he came to the palace, she said, "You have 1 more place to hide." Off he went and called for the fox. And the fox thought a minute and said,
"I think you had better ask the princess for 2 weeks.
2 weeks, he said, holding his neck. And he went back. But when he saw her, he said, "I need 2 weeks." She thought to herself, "Now that's really curious." But she said, "2 weeks and not a second more. I'm in no rush to cut off your head, but cut off your head I will." Off he went to the fox, and the fox was already digging and burrowing and crawling down into a deep hole, and the fisherman's son followed behind the fox, and the fox dug a tunnel under the earth right beneath the mountain on which the princess's palace stood, and that took 1 week. And then the fox began to dig and claw and burrow and pull the dirt and climb straight up through the middle of the mountain all the way up to the top of the mountain right beneath the palace. That was almost 2 weeks. And for 1 day the fox broke through the floor of the palace and then pushed the fisherman's son right up at the last minute, right underneath the throne on which the princess sat, and then scurried back down. The princess looked in all directions. She couldn't find him. Then she lifted her mirror and looked. She looked in the sky, in heaven, in every direction, into the other worlds, beneath the sea. She couldn't find him anywhere. She thought, "This is exciting." But then she thought, "Where is he?" And she called out, "Where are you? I can't find you anywhere." And she heard a little voice, "I'm right here." "Where Where are you? I don't see you anywhere, not even in my mirror." "I'm right here." Finally she said, "Come out." The fisherman's son crawled right out from beneath the throne, beneath her legs, and stood up. She took a look at him and she said, "You'll marry me." And he said, "All right." So that night, the fisherman's son married the all-seeing princess. So the one who could see everywhere married the kindest young man in the world. But before they went to bed, they told each other their stories. And when the fisherman told his, the all-seeing princess said, "You know, in truth, your father's prayer did work. But like most prayers, it didn't happen the way you expected it to." You know, they lived happily ever after. They ruled equally, and they ruled with kindness and wisdom, so that everyone in their world and all worlds lived happily ever after. I grew up in Borough Park in Brooklyn, and after World War II, most everyone in our neighborhood was from one or another Eastern European country. In Coney Island, there was a huge community of Gypsies, and they spoke Romani and Romanian. So we would go to Coney Island, and there were often, marketplaces and fortune tellers, and my mother would always drag me there because she could speak to them. She knew some Romani language, and she could speak, of course, Romanian and Yiddish. So we would always go, and always, they were fabulously interesting, many beautiful layered skirts and black-haired, green-eyed women. My mother was blonde and blue-eyed. My father had dark hair, but blue eyes. So my mother would always say, "You see, you're really a gypsy. They threw you away. I took pity on you. I took you out of the garbage pail." And instead of being insulted, I was really interested in this and began to dress that way by the time I was 11 years old. I loved to play under the grand piano in my living room. I brought all my dollies downstairs. My mother played Romanian music, Czardash and gypsy songs. And I would always imagine that a gypsy caravan was in the walls of my house. And if I spun around very, very quickly, I could make it come to life. There was one story that my mother told that I loved to imagine while she played music. It was about a gypsy boy named Baragladdin. He was the son of a gypsy queen named Yanka. She knew this story from her mother. Her mother had heard it in Romania when she was a child. Baragladdin was born late one night in the back of his mother's wagon, and there appeared, just as he was born, to Yanka, the three sisters of fate, the Svoboda sisters. And they blessed and they cursed the child. They said, "This boy is given the gift of beauty." Yanka, hearing this, tore off a copper coin, an amulet that she wore, tied it around with red threads, sewed it into the cloth that she wrapped the baby in to keep away the evil eye. Then the three sisters of fate disappeared. Baragladdin grew up to be a wild and wonderful child, but he had the gift of beauty. He was like a crow. He loved shiny things. He loved the stories that the old people told about a box of gold at the end of the rainbow. And he learned to play the fiddle better than any grown man. They said that the songs that he played were so beautiful that they made everyone cry and laugh. Whenever it rained, Baragladdin waited for a rainbow, and when he saw a rainbow, he would leap and run and try to get to the end to find the box of gold. He never did. But once, when he was about 9 years old, he ran clear across the river at the edge of the meadow where the gypsies were camped. He passed a long row of willow trees and came to a clearing, and there was the end of the rainbow. The field was filled with light, and there was the box. Baragladdin fell to his knees. "It's true," he said, and he tried to open the lid, but he couldn't pry open the box. And then he realized that he probably had to give something back. And so he called out to the rainbow and he said, "I will make a song so beautiful that the box of gold will open." The rainbow faded, as rainbows do, but the box was there. He put the box inside a tree. There was an open nut on one of the willow trees. He marked it with an X. And then every day when they were camped by that meadow, he went back, took out the box, and he practiced a song. One night, Baragladdin awoke and heard a sound familiar to all gypsy children, the sound of wheels moving underneath the wagon. They were leaving that clearing. Baragladdin realized that he had left his box of gold behind. He called out to his mother, Yanka, that they should stop. Yanka said, "What's wrong with you, Baragladdin? We gypsies always leave. But I want to go back to that place." "Oh, one day we'll come back there. Go to sleep." Baragladdin couldn't sleep. He promised that he would continue to make his song, and that somehow he would find that place again, play his beautiful song to the rainbow, and the box would open. He was a passionate little boy and a passionate young man. And every time they stopped somewhere, Baragladdin would look for a row of willow trees alongside a river. But they never seemed to come back to that same place. So he became a master of roads, and he knew all the ways and all the roads, all the pathways. They never came to that place. His mother always wondered, "What has happened to my child?" Baragladdin grew up. He was a great fiddle player, but he was strange. He kept to himself. Most gypsies didn't. And he didn't often play for others. But he knew the roads so well, and he cared so much that they stopped by a meadow near water. Soon, Yanka, growing old, slept in the back of the wagon. He led the wagon, and soon he led the whole caravan of gypsies. And after a while, when his mother was very old, he became the king of the gypsies, for no one else knew the roads as well as he did. After a while, Baragladdin began to think, "Maybe I dreamed that box. Maybe I dreamed those willow trees. I'm a fool my whole life to search for a box of gold at the end of the rainbow." When Yanka was very old and she was dying, she was lying in the back of the wagon. She called her son and she said, "Baragladdin, I have wondered for so many years. What is it that troubles you?" And Baragladdin, who had sworn never to tell about the box of gold, lifted up his fiddle, and he said to his mother, "I have written the most beautiful song in the world.
and he played the song for the rainbow. And as he played, his mother passed away, and there was a smile on her face. And after that, Baragladdin thought he should give up the dream, and he put away the fiddle. But he really couldn't forget, and whenever it rained, he waited to see if there was a rainbow. When he was very, very old and somewhat frail, there was a rainstorm, and it was so foggy that he had no idea really where they were stopping. And in the morning, when the rain ended, Baragladdin put his head out the window of the wagon, and there he saw a meadow with a river and a row of willow trees. And there was a rainbow stretching from the gypsy camp clear across the trees. And even though he was old and frail, he went out barefoot, taking his fiddle, and he started to run. Everybody called after him and said, "What is wrong with you?" And Baragladdin said nothing. But he fell by the river, and his vest tore. And unbeknownst to him, the copper amulet that he'd kept with him his whole life fell to the ground. He picked himself up, crossed the river, went past the willow trees until he came to the one with the X carved on it, put his hand into the hole and took out the box that he had left there so long ago. He put it down on the earth. The rainbow was still bright. Baragladdin prepared with all of his strength to open the lid, but it easily opened, and there was nothing in it. And then he began to laugh, and Baragladdin lifted up his fiddle, and he played his song, and the music was so beautiful. He played with all his strength until he used up his strength and fell, crashing the fiddle and falling to his death. Now the old people, seeing Baragladdin run like a fool, sent a young girl out after him. And when she came to the side of the river, she saw something in the grass. She bent down and found the copper amulet. As she held it in her hands, she looked up. On the other side of the river, before a row of willow trees, stood the three Fates, the three Svoboda sisters. And they blessed her. "We give to you the gift of beauty." And then they vanished. She held on to the copper amulet to keep away the evil eye, and went with all of her speed across the river to look for the old man, and then she saw him. But when she looked at his face, he was smiling. There was a little empty box, so she closed it, and she left it, and she went back to the gypsy camp. It is said that she became a great poet, and she told this story. And that's how come it was told to someone who told it to someone who told it to someone who told it to my mother, who told it to me. Supposedly there was a city near the Black Sea called Auch, and only stupid people lived there. And everyone likes to tell stories about stupid people. Some of the people of Auch had bought themselves beautiful new boots at the bazaar, exactly the same pair of boots, and they sat in a circle. They couldn't take their eyes off their boots. They couldn't admire them enough, but they couldn't get up. They sat in the circle all day. They sat there all evening until the bazaar was empty. Someone came by and said, "Why don't you go home?" One of the people of Auch explained, "Well, we're in a very difficult position. We would like to go home, but
You see, we have these new boots on. They all look exactly the same, so you can understand we no longer recognize which are our own legs." "Ah," said the man, "I think I can help you." He took his riding switch and he danced it on their backs. Instantly, they sprang up, and each one found his own legs. Another time, there were 3 people from Auch who were traveling in the country, and they came to a cave. They thought there might be a fox in it, so one of them crawled in to see. There was a bear inside, and with one blow of his paw, the bear cut off the head of the intruder. Now, as the man showed no sign of life, his friends pulled the body out, and they were surprised to see that there was no head on it. But then they couldn't remember if he had a head or not. So one of them rushed back to the village to ask the man's wife, did he have a head before he went on this journey? And she said, I can't remember for sure because he always wore a hat. Another time, some natives of Auch were on a picnic and they saw a sack lying at the foot of a steep riverbank. They couldn't climb down to it and they were curious about what was in the sack. So they decided that they would make a chain of their own bodies. The first one held tightly to a tree. The others formed the chain, one holding fast by the other's hands. But the first one's head began to tickle and he wanted to scratch it. He said, "Let my left hand go for a moment. I've got to scratch my head." And the second said, "Good, be quick about it." He let go and all of them, except for the first, fell into the water. And those are some of the stories of the stupid people of the city called Ouch. I think that actually there is a town called Ouch everywhere in the world. And in fact, most people get there too easily. It's well traveled. When I was 4 years old, I had a dream with my eyes wide open. I was lying on my bed when I heard the sound of rushing water. I saw a mountain range of 7 mountains. There was a line of people riding on horses with beautiful robes, holding banners on poles. They led me to a waterfall, and there by the waterfall rushed a river, not rushing down the way rivers move, but the water going from one shore to the other. That place. I wanted to go to that place. I got off my bed, went downstairs, walked through the kitchen. My mother called out, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going out." But I couldn't find that place in my dream. Not in my backyard, or when I walked down the street. So I went home. "What's wrong?" asked my mother. I told her about the dream and that place and how I wanted to go there. And she assured me, "You won't find that place outside, but don't stop trying." And then she added, "Well, if you should hear about where it is and you want to go, ask me first. I'll pack you sandwiches." I thought she was making fun of me. But the next day, she took me to Mrs. Krasner's house. Mrs. Krasner lived on the corner in the last house. She was my Grandma Malia's best friend. They had traveled together from Romania when they were girls. Mrs. Krasner knew a lot of interesting things. In fact, my brother and I made believe we were scared of her. We pretended that she was either a witch or a gypsy because she had long black hair, wore long black skirts. Everything in her house was big. Big table, big chairs, big photographs, big couches, big urns, big pots, big plates, and little teeny tiny china teacups. My mother had me tell Mrs. Kresner the dream. And I did. Mrs. Kresner closed her eyes. And then she said, I heard many stories when I was a little girl. We spent our summers on the Black Sea, and in the mornings we told our dreams. Your grandmother had the best memory. But remember, if you have a scary dream, don't be afraid. It's probably good luck. And if you have a really good dream, that's good, and also good luck. Then we had a little something to eat, and Mrs. Kresner told me this story. There was once a boy who was considered to be a fool. He lived with his stepmother. She gave him the job of watching the corn that she spread on the threshing floor. Don't fall asleep, or the hens will come in and eat the corn. But he always fell asleep. One day she got so angry that she woke him up and said, "You are nothing but a dreamer." And he said, "Well, I had a remarkable dream." "What was it?" she said. He said, "I was standing with one foot in town and the other foot all the way in Baghdad to the east. The sun was on my right side. The moon was on the left side. My body and my face were covered with stars, and I was wearing a crown on my head." "Give me that dream," said the stepmother. "Oh no, I can't give you that dream. It's mine. It came and it went." "You are so foolish," she said. "Go away. I never want to see you again." And he left to seek his fortune. He passed by the palace, and the king was there. And the king said, "Where are you going?" And he told the king the story about his stepmother and the dream. And the king said, "Ha! Tell me the dream." "Oh no," he said. "It was a mistake to tell my stepmother the dream. It's mine. It came and it went." "Give me your dream." The king said, "I am the king." "Oh no," he said. I can't give you my dream. It's mine." The king was angry and put him in jail. Now the king had a daughter. She felt sorry for the dreamer, so she brought him food. Otherwise, he would have starved to death. The princess was not happy because she was to marry the king of the east in Baghdad, and she didn't like him. One day, the king of Baghdad sent 4 female horses to the king of the west with a test. "You must tell me which is the mother, which is the eldest, which is the middle, and which is the youngest mare. If you can do that by morning, I won't marry your daughter. But if you don't know, she's mine." Oh, the king of the west couldn't tell one horse from the other. And so he said to his daughter, "I'm sorry, but you will have to marry the king of the east." She went to the dreamer, gave him some food, and said, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to marry the king of the east. Nobody will bring you food anymore." And the dreamer asked her, "Why?" And she told him about the 4 mares. He closed his eyes. He said, "Tell your father to give those 4 mares water with a lot of salt and no food, then lock them in the stable overnight, and early in the morning open the stable doors. The mother will rush out first, then the youngest, then the middle, then the oldest." The princess went right to the king and told him, and because no one else had come up with an answer, he did just as the dreamer said. And the princess didn't have to marry the king of the east. But the king of the east didn't stop thinking. He was furious. The next week, he had a magic arrow made. He had it shot from the east all the way to the west, and it landed right in front of the palace and stuck fast in the ground. "If someone can pull that arrow up by morning, the princess doesn't have to marry me. But if no one can pull that arrow up, she's mine." The king called the strongest men in the Caucasus. No one could pull the arrow up that night. Once again, the princess brought food to the dreamer and told him the story. The dreamer closed his eyes. Then he said, "Get me a ladder. I'll climb out of this jail. I'll pull out the arrow." And that's just what he did, and then went right back to jail. When the king of the West saw that the arrow was freed from the ground, he said to his daughter, "Whoever pulled that arrow out can marry you." She said, "It's the dreamer that you put in jail." "Bring him to me," said the king. And the king said, "You can marry my daughter." But when the king of the East heard this, he said, "See if that young man can pick up the arrow and carry it away." Well, the king tried to pick it up. All the strong men tried to pick it up. Nobody could pick it up, but the dreamer put his hand on the arrow, picked it up, and so he married the princess. The king of the East was fuming, and he declared war on the king of the West. Now that night, the king of the West married his daughter to the dreamer. And the next morning the dreamer went to the king and said, "I will go to Baghdad, and I will fight with the king of the East. Do you want my armies? No, I will fight with the best power I have, the power of my dreaming mind." The king of the West said, "Well, are you sure?" And he said, "I think so." And off he went. As the dreamer was walking, he saw a man in a field who was plowing the earth. Every time he pulled up a huge clump of earth, he put it in his mouth and swallowed it. The dreamer said, "That's quite an amazing task."
"Well, not as amazing as the dreamer."
"Well, I am the dreamer. Come with me." He went a little bit further, and there, standing by the Black Sea, was a man greedily swallowing salty sea water. "How unusual," said the dreamer.
"Not as unusual as the dreamer."
"I am the dreamer. Come with me." So the three of them set off. They hadn't gone far when he saw a tall man who had big stones bound to his ankles, who could walk 1 mile each step. "Wow," said the dreamer, "that is really marvelous. Not as marvelous as the dreamer who married a princess," said Earthwalker. "I am the dreamer. Come with me." They went a little bit further, and there was a man lying on the earth with his ear to the ground. And every so often he turned and whispered into the earth. "How curious," said the dreamer. "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm a listener, and I'm listening to the ants who are having a battle in the underworld, and I'm trying to give them a little advice." "How extraordinary." "Oh, not as extraordinary as the dreamer." "I am the dreamer. Come with me." So they walked a little bit further, and there was a man who had a bow and arrow raised up toward the sky. "And what are you doing?" said the dreamer. "Well, I am a seer. I see so far that I can shoot this arrow straight into heaven." "Fantastic," said the dreamer. "Not as fantastic as the dreamer who married the princess. That's me. Come with us." And they walked a little further, and then they saw something truly amazing. They saw a man whose hands were so quick that he could change the wings of doves without their knowing it. "Very interesting," said the dreamer. "Well, not as amazing as the dreamer himself," said the wing changer. "I am the dreamer. Come with us." They walked a little further, and there was a holy man carrying a huge house of worship on his back. "Now that's quite a task," said the dreamer. "Oh," said the holy man, "I carry this house of prayer everywhere. I place it on the earth when needed, so people could come and pray." "That is wonderful," said the dreamer. "Ah," said the holy man, "not as wonderful as the boy who dreamed and married a princess." "That's me. Come with us." And so the 8 set off to Baghdad to wage war on the king of the East. When they got there, the king of the East was preparing for battle. But the dreamer said, "I have come to battle with you, not by force, but by wit." The king of the East said, "All right," because he liked riddles, he liked tests, and he thought he could win. The king of the East said, "All right. I have 1,000 bakers. Tonight each one of them will bake 1,000 enormous breads. Eat them by morning." "Oh," said the dreamer, "that's a very difficult task. I'll try." And he went right to the earth swallower.
Ooh, that'll be easy.
And earth swallower by morning ate all the bread. The king said, "Well, I have 1,000,000 giant casks of water. Drink them before the sun goes down." "Oh," said the dreamer, "that is so difficult." And he went right to Ocean Swallower. Ocean Swallower was delighted. He drank them all. The king of the East now pondered and said, "Why don't I send one of my messengers with one of your messengers 3 days away to a well? Let them each get water and come back. Whoever comes back first is the winner." Now, of course, the king of the East had a plan. But the dreamer went to the walker and said, "You can go easily." And the walker thought, "I'll just walk along with the king of the East's messenger," and so they did for a while. Now, the king of the East's messenger had some poison, and when they stopped to rest, he poured it into Earth Walker's water. Earth Walker drank and fell asleep, and the king's messenger walked all the way to the well, filled his pail with water, put it on his shoulder, and started back. The man with the bow and arrow saw in the distance that the king's messenger was coming back by himself. So he opened his eyes wide, and he saw that Earthwalker had fallen asleep. He took his bow and arrow and he shot, hitting the stones on his feet, waking him up, and when Earthwalker woke up, he just took one step all the way to the well, filled the pail with water, took one step, and came right back ahead of the king's messenger. "You win," said the king of the East. "Tonight, we'll have a great feast to celebrate." But the king of the East had another plan. He was putting poison in all the dreamer's servants' food. But you know, the listener overheard his plan. He called the one who changes the wings of doves. And right before the eyes of the king of the East, without his seeing, Wing Changer changed all the plates, and all the king's servants ate the poisoned food. "Well," said the king of the East, "indeed you have won. But, unfortunately, you'll have to take my entire palace and my daughter, all of her servants, all the cows and horses and camels with you." "That is challenging," said the dreamer. And he called the holy man. And the holy man, the next morning, placed on top of the house of worship the entire palace from Baghdad, including the king's daughter, all the horses, the sheep, the camels, and the goats. And they all set off to go home. The dreamer had been gone for 5 years. His wife had given birth to a little boy. When he came to the palace, he sat down on the throne. The princess placed a gold crown on his head. She sat down by his right side, glowing like the sun. The king of the East's daughter sat on his left side, lovely like the moon. And the 5-year-old son lifted a gold bowl filled with water and washed his father's feet. And when he looked up at his father, the light from his eyes twinkled like stars on his father's chest and his father's face. And the dreamer said, "My dream has come true." Mrs. Krasner said to me, "So? Be careful who you tell your dreams to. But they're yours. Don't forget it." Not every dream I had was a good dream or a magic dream. I used to have one nightmare again and again. On the top of a mountain, there was a castle like a tower. In the tower was a spiral staircase, and at the top of the stairs was a dreadful witch holding a broom in her right hand, her hair on fire. I would climb up the spiral steps, forgetting she was there, and there she would be. I would be frightened. Her face would grow beet red. She would begin chasing me with her broom down the steps, and I'd run and run. Get outside, the entire castle would burst into flame, and just as the witch was about to catch me, I would wake up. My pillow was so hot. I understood that the nightmare was on that side of the pillow. Taking a deep breath, I would turn the pillow over to the cool side, then close my eyes and sing a little song to fall asleep and keep away the bad dream. Trees and flowers, trees and flowers, trees and flowers, trees and flowers, trees and flowers. And I would fall into a sweet sleep, see a little forest, and there on a unicycle was riding Bongo the bear from one of my children's books. And as soon as I saw Bongo, I fell deeply asleep. And that's how I learned to keep away my nightmare. My uncle loved funny stories, and he told stories from the old country about a man named Mullah Nasruddin. Now, Nasruddin was considered by some to be a great, great, wise religious man, and by others to be a fool. Once, Nasruddin was looking out the window. Many children were playing, and they began to laugh and make a lot of noise, and Nasruddin was annoyed. He opened the window and he said, "I just heard that someone is giving away sweet covered apples in the market. Go and get them." And the children, without a thought, excited, turned and started running for the make-believe apples. When Nasruddin saw how excited they were, he got hungry, and he thought, maybe it's true. He ran out the door, and he ran after the children to find the apples. One night, when Nasruddin was sleeping, the window opened, and in came thieves. They started taking everything in the house. Nasruddin was scared. He thought, what would an intelligent person do? So he opened his eyes wide, lay flat down like a board, and made believe he was dead. The thieves took everything. They climbed out the window back on their donkeys. They started to ride away. Nasruddin got up. He looked around. There were a few things left. He picked them up, climbed out the window, got on his donkey, and started riding after the thieves. The thieves were surprised. They rode faster and faster. Finally, Nasruddin called out and said, "Hey, wait for me." They said, "What do you want?" He said, "You took everything. I thought I'd come and live with you." My uncle told me that Nasruddin never rode on the back of his donkey facing where he was going. He was always sitting facing the rear. He was more interested in where he was coming from than where he was going. Another time, Nasruddin left his village on the donkey. People said, "Where are you going?" He said, "Well, I'm going to such and such a place that's very far away." People said, "Do you know how to get there?" He said, "No, I have no idea." I said, "Then how could you go to such a faraway place that you don't know where it is?" He said, "My donkey knows the way." I would always say, "I don't understand that." And my uncle would laugh and say, "Learn to listen to your donkey." There was once a king who had 3 sons. One morning, the king awoke, and he was blind, and his body was weak. No doctor could heal him. The 3 princes came to their father and said, "We would give our lives to heal you." And the king said, "There is only one way in which I will be healed. You must bring me fruit from the garden of the Queen of Everything." The eldest son said, "To horse." He leapt onto his horse with his sword and set off over the 7 mountain ranges of the Caucasus. He went over an iceberg, and on the other side, where the rain fell, the earth was so dry and parched that it was completely cracked. And there was an old man with a long beard who was laboriously trying to sew the cracks of the earth together. The eldest son looked at him and said, "Ha! That's the most foolish thing I've ever seen." The old man said, "No luck to you." And the eldest brother rode off. He came to a river of milk and crossed it, and there the snow was falling, and it was icy cold, and growing up in the snow were the most fertile, beautiful fruit trees. This must be the garden of the Queen of Everything. The eldest son took the fruit, put it in his sack, and rode home. His father said, "You left a long time ago, back quick. You didn't go far enough. When I was a young man, I went to the garden of the Queen of Everything. It took me so long, it took the time that a potato boils." The middle son said, "I'll go." He jumped on a horse with his sword, and he rode over the same 7 mountain ranges, crossed the huge iceberg which was so moist, and there was that old man trying to sew up the cracks in the earth. "What a fool you are! I have never seen anyone do anything so futile," said the middle brother. The old man looked up. "No luck to you." On rode the middle brother. He went right over the river of milk, past the snow where everything was growing, and he came to a second river of oil. He crossed the river of oil, and there his feet sank into the mud up to his knees. There were growing the most beautiful fruit trees. This must be the garden of the Queen of Everything. He picked fruit, put it in his sack, and rode back home to the king. The king said, "My son, gone long, came back quick, but you didn't go far enough. When I went there, I was a young man. It took so long, it took the time it takes tobacco to burn in a pipe." The youngest prince said, "I'll try." "You," said the 2 older brothers, "and there's no horse fresh enough. You'll have to take the 3-legged horse in the stable." He said, "All right." The youngest prince rode on a 3-legged horse over those 7 mountain ranges. He crossed the iceberg, and there was the old man, laboriously trying to sew up the cracks in the earth. And the youngest prince said, "Old man, you are working so hard. I wish you good luck." And the old man said, "Good luck to you." "Old man," said the youngest prince, would you happen to know where I would find the garden of the Queen of Everything? I'm trying to heal my father. And the old man looked up and he said, well, I went there once when I was a young man. You have to cross 3 rivers, a river of milk, a river of oil, and then a river of honey. You'll see 3 towers, one of gold, one of silver, one of crystal. That's where the queen lives. Around those towers is her garden, but around the garden there is a fence of iron. Open up the gate, only using iron. Iron likes iron. When you walk on the grass, wrap your feet in grass. Grass likes grass. And don't take the fruit with your bare hands. The trees like wood. Good luck. Thank you, said the youngest prince, and off he rode, crossing the 3 rivers, the first 2 just as his brother had, and then he crossed the river of honey. And there in the distance he saw the 3 towers, one of gold, one of silver, one of crystal, and he rode right to the iron gate, jumped off his horse, and took a nail that he had, an iron nail, and he put the iron in the lock and turned it, and the iron lock called out,
Ouch! Ouch! Iron touches iron!
and the Queen of Everything awoke. She looked out of the tower, and she called out to the lock, and she said, oh, lock, it's only the wind. Go back to sleep. So the youngest prince opened the iron gate. He wrapped his feet with grass, and he put his grass shoes down on the grass, and the grass cried out.
Ow! Grass touches grass!
The Queen of Everything awoke. She looked out, and she said, oh, grass, it's only the wind. Go back to sleep. The youngest prince went to the fruit trees. They were so abundant. He took a branch, he split it, he held up the forked wood up to the wood of the tree, and as he plucked the fruit, the tree called out, ouch, wood touches wood, ouch. And the Queen of Everything woke up and she said, oh, tree, it's a windy night, and it's only the wind. Go back to sleep. Now the youngest prince filled his sack with the fruit from her garden and went out the gate and climbed on his horse. But just as he was about to leave, suddenly he was struck with desire, the way a match ignites into fire. And that desire was like a huge fire that grew into the greatest longing. He cared for nothing other than to see the face of the Queen of Everything. Leaving the horse and his fruit, he jumped down, he went through the gate, he went across the grass, he opened the doors to the tower, and he looked in every room until he found her chamber. He opened the door. He was nearly blinded by the light. He made out a gold table, and on it was wine and sweet meat and fruit. And he thought, she'll know I was here if I eat. And so he ate the food. And then his eyes grew accustomed to the light that was brighter than the sun, and he saw that she lay on a bed, and there were golden candelabras by her head and by her feet, and he could see that on her forehead was the moon. He realized she was so astonishing that if he bent down and picked her up, he could lift her up between his 2 little fingers, and if he let go suddenly, she would fill the entire world. Ah, he said, I have seen the Queen of Everything. Let her know I was here. He bent down. He kissed her on the right cheek once and bit her twice. And he left. He climbed on his horse and he rode back home to his father the king. And his father said, my son, you have traveled far enough. The king took the fruit. He ate. But he wasn't healed. So they all went to bed that night, disappointed. in the morning, the Queen of Everything awoke. She looked first and saw that someone had eaten the fruit. So she went right to her magic mirror on the wall, which tells her everything. But before she asked a question, she saw the shadow of a mark on her right cheek. She was extremely sensitive. She said, "Who has been in my room and dared to kiss me once and bite me twice?" And the mirror told her where to go. She put on her armor, she put on her helmet, pulled down her visor, went out and climbed on her horse. She was the general of 7 armies. As she rode, all of her armies rode behind her. She traveled clear across the 7 mountain ranges to the palace of the king. Outside the gates of the palace, she sat on her horse, and she called out as the sun rose, "May he who took the fruit from my garden tell me how he did it." Just then, the eldest prince was waking up. He leaned out the window and he said, "Ah, it was me." "And how did you do it?" she said. "I did it with my wit." The Queen of Everything laughed and said, "Go back to sleep." Well, the middle brother was just walking across the ramparts. He saw her, and she said, "Was it you?" He said, "Oh, yes, it was me." "And how did you do it?" "I did it with my strength." And she said, "Your strength? No one gets my fruit by force. Go back to sleep." Well, the youngest prince overheard this, and he came out into the yard by her horse, and she said, "Was it you?" And he said, "It was." And so he told the story, and she, fierce and fearless, leapt off her horse, lifted her visor, went right to the youngest prince. She kissed him once on the right cheek and bit him twice. She kissed him once on the left cheek and bit him twice, and she said, "He who takes from me, I take back 2-fold. Now, will you marry me?" And he said, "Indeed, I will." The Queen of Everything went before the king. She placed her hands on her own eyes, and then placed them on the king's eyes. He who was blind opened his eyes and could see. Then she ran her hands down her own body and touched the king. And the king instantly was healed and became so strong he was stronger than 10 bulls. That night, the Queen of Everything married the youngest prince. They ruled equally, and they ruled with wisdom and kindness. She became the general of 8 armies, but in that kingdom there was no war. And you know, everyone lived happily ever after. And you, who brought this story to life through your own imagination and heart, may you live happily ever after as well.
Thank you for listening to The Gift of Dreams with Laura Sims, with music by David Willey. This program was produced by Windhorse Productions, www.windhorse.com. For more titles in the series Secrets of the World, visit www.storytrade.com or call Sounds True at 1-800-333-9185.